Hey Kaz, it's Zach. Thank you so much for sending us these videos. I know you had the whole drive and there's so many things to watch, so I'm happy that you were kind of able to narrow it down and send us this one for us to see. So there's a lot to get through, and um, I know you had so many questions in your emails that I'm gonna just do this video review, and I'm actually gonna pretend like there were no questions, and I'm just gonna uh, tell you what I'm seeing, and hope that that kind of helps out with some curiosities or answers some questions for you. Okay, so let's get to it. So actually, before we jump into this in earnest, what I'm going to suggest, and I know the other video there's a new and improved camera angle, but I still think it's worth sitting a bit further back from the camera. That way, I can see your hands. I can see how you're sitting. Here, there's a general good idea of how you're sitting regarding your posture. Your shoulders are even. Your arms look like there's good separation. They're in proper positioning and angle, so that's really good. The only thing to me though is it looks like your guitar might be a little bit too much to the right side of your body. And why I say that is because your arm is coming in here at an angle that places your right hand above the sound hole. Now, in a perfect world, what we'd actually like and what we recommend is that the thumb is maybe about an inch inside. So if we have the edge of the sound hole here, your thumb is there, and then the rest of the fingers are kind of at the beginning of the sound hole or a little bit in. Okay? Oftentimes, what happens with people is that the hand ends up over here. I haven't seen that issue with you regarding these videos yet, but your hand does tend to travel a bit forward. That is fine if we're having a discussion about how to play with colors and tones and all that. But I think for a bass sound, for our home bass, we want it right here. So the thumb is about maybe an inch inwards, and the rest of the fingers are a bit further behind, but kind of at the beginning of the sound hole. The other thing I'm wondering, and I was going to ask you this in the email, but I figured because I'm doing their video review, I can just do it here, is are you playing with a guitar support or is your leg up? I have a feeling you're using a support, and if that's the case, I would actually recommend maybe lifting up the guitar a bit. So if you see me sitting here with my support, I actually don't have this on 100% properly, but it's more for the guitar. But you can see it's not too high and the guitar isn't really low. So it rests on my leg, and I'm able to play it. So if you're kind of having second guesses about it, look at Alan's video on and how he sets up his support, because I think he's got a more typical guitar, so it's he's done it a better job than I have with mine, how I set it up. Okay, so let's jump into this. Okay, so there are a couple of things with the right hand that I want to talk about. I know you were asking many, many questions about your left hand, and to be honest with you, it looks very good. Of course, you singled out measure 10, and the thing is, it's a giant stretch. I have rather big hands, and I have trouble getting to that. So I can sympathize because it's not easy. It's a really big stretch. We can talk about a couple methods in order to work on it, but let's just start right at the beginning for now. What I'm seeing with your right hand is that it's kind of coming in from above, and there's a few things that I wanted to address. First of all, is your thumb stroke. So ideally, your thumb is also going to generate motion from the big knuckle, and you're going to be able to play and kind of do that and come back, right? So the way it's looking right now when I see your hand is that it's coming from above and you're snapping it and you're doing this. What we recommend is that we have the wrist flat, everything's in a nice kind of linear motion. And the thumb, the motion is going to come from the big knuckle. and you're going to play. So you're not snapping. No. Okay? So there's that issue. Another thing that I'm noticing is that when we watch your hand, so there's an example of the thumb. When we watch your fingers, it looks like what it looks like is that you're holding one position here and you're trying to stretch out your fingers as long as possible, and you're using the middle joints to create the flex as opposed to using your big knuckles. So it looks like this instead of this. You know, and ideally our hand is going to move down. You know, our elbow moves a little bit, and so we don't have our fingers really stretched out. Your hand is not looking like this. I'm just over exaggerating for purpose. Okay? But what would be a bit better is if our hand was a bit lower, our fingers on an angle, and they can come into the palm, and you can initiate the movements with the big knuckles. So that's a big thing moving forward in terms of the individual notes, in terms of the melodic notes or just individual lines. Another thing is with your chords. So as you've seen in the woodshed, we really talk about this whole concept of bringing our fingers into the palm. This is a thing called sympathetic motion, and the idea is that, you know, our hand claps. It feels completely natural for our fingers to be doing this. So when we play guitar, we should also try to have our hands and fingers feel as natural as possible. So when we do, you know, tense movements with our middle joint, which you're not doing, I'm just demonstrating, it's stiff and it's not going to get faster or smoother, right? But if we do loose movements with little or no tension that are controlled from the big knuckles, as the tempo increases, yes, our motion's going to get smaller. We're not going to be able to do this clap into the palm every single time. But what we're going to be doing is we're training our fingers to feel as if they're going into the palm. And when they do that, then they can get faster while staying relaxed and comfortable. Okay? So instead of doing, you know, this with chords where you're playing from your middle knuckles, it would be so much better to be bum and try to bring them into the palm. Of course, it's not perfect. You know, sometimes we have fast chords that we play 2 in a row, and we cannot do this twice. But on long chords, like for example, in measure 4, I think that's a perfect situation when you play that D minor chord to really bring your fingers in. So let's just take a look. So if you notice, none of your chords have you done this, and on all the alternations, you brought them in a little bit, but they're not coming in all the way. Right, so those are long chords that we can really tell our hand to relax. So I'd really try to address that with your practice. Okay. What we're going to do is, you know what, let's just skip to measure 10 and let's talk about ways we can try to work on that, okay? Okay, so when we have big stretches and difficult chords, there's different approaches we can use. Uh, the most important thing is whatever we're going to use to practice, we need to plan how our fingers are going to move. Because what happens is we have an A minor chord, and if we have to jump from having all of our fingers on to that, it's not going to happen. I don't care if you've got the quickest fingers in the world or the biggest hands in the world with the longest fingers. That's going to be really difficult, and it's probably not going to happen. So here's what I'm going to recommend. When we get to that G note, I think all of the fingers should be off, and you should already be thinking about where your fingers need to go. And if you're not already thinking about it, you should be. And if you're planning for it, your fingers should actually be traveling there already. So if we go 1, 2, 3, sorry, 1, 2, whoa, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That suddenly becomes easier, right? And we already have that open A being like a drone going underneath all the other notes. So if we remove our top notes, it's not the end of the world because we still have that bass note continuing on underneath. So if we go from there and we put on our G, we take all of our fingers off. Know where your fingers need to go. So, okay, my third finger's already reaching up. My first finger's already curling down. And then when the time comes, boom. You can also just practice that. Play a G, G, get your fingers ready. Know everything's ready. It's going to land well. Put it on and play. So this is a technique called a corrective pause. And when we use corrective pauses, we don't do it in time, but we make sure everything's going correctly. So 4. So there, my finger wasn't ready, right? I went this, and look at where my fingers were. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get my fingers ready. I'm going to put them on, and then I'm going to play. And slowly you can introduce rhythm into that. So you can go 4 and 1, 4 and 1, 4 and 1, 4 and 1, 4, 1, and work on it like that. And then you can use the add a note method, except we're going to do it backwards. So instead of going, A minor, B, C, G, instead of doing it that way, what we can do is we can go G chord, then we can go C, G chord. And chances are if you have that down, then the rest of the adding measure 9 to it, it's not going to be a problem. Okay? The next issue becomes how to play the G, because that's a really big stretch. So if you are having difficulty with training your pinky to go down, take your G off. Take that low G off when you go to play the high G. Again, we have those middle strings ringing in the middle. So to take that bass note off, it's not the end of the world. And you're also going G, G. So the harmony's there. I wouldn't worry too much about losing that note, especially if it's going to make everything sound better. Okay? So, and then and again, apply the same idea. Go 1, 2, 3. But I muted the strings there. Don't do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And go about it that way. Okay? I know it's difficult, so you're gonna have to spend a little bit of time on it. Also, make sure your hand is relaxed. When we do big stretches like this, our hand can wear out really quickly. So relax it. Do a little like guitar shake, hand shake dance, whatever you want to call it. Take your hand off, relax it, move it around a bit, get some blood flow, then try it again. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you about in this piece is just a musical thing. So I know you've mentioned singing and playing all these different instruments which is fantastic. The thing we want to do now is we want to apply that knowledge and those abilities to how you're making the guitar sing. What I would really like to hear in these in these videos is that all the notes connect. So if we got rid of the chord and we just played the first measure, this is what we should hear. We should hear, right? C, B, C, D, E. Then if we add the chord, okay? And this is not how you're sounding, but this is how guitar players often sound. They'll go. So some will be articulated, some will be clipped, some won't sound the whole time. But what we really want is we want to imagine we're singing it. La, da, 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 dum. So try to apply that same mentality and try to make the notes connect as if you were singing. And really watch out for whenever you have notes with your on your pinky, like the D here, that we still maintain that connection to the next beat until we play that note. So we want to hear, we don't want to hear, okay? So I hope I've addressed some of your questions. I know we've covered a lot, so please feel free to ask me any follow-up questions you might have. I'm gonna go straight into your next video, but I figure it's probably going to be better to have 2 videos instead of one really long video. So I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye-bye.